Filipino history to me is more of a story that's been passed down to me by my nanny. Listening to her stories about Lapu-Lapu, Magellan, Jose Rizal. But I've never really learned any more than just the stories. I do know that we have been time and time again been conquered, or like Spaniards, Americans, even Japanese at one point. So, and these are things that I find we get lost with our identity because of that too. Like who are the Filipinos? Who are we?
I've been in Canada for 25 years now. Came here when I was 4 years old. When growing up, it was just, I was a Canadian. It was really shocking for me that I had no sense what a Filipina is, what a Filipino Canadian would be.
I'm 27 now. I went when I was 20, so 7 years ago. I didn't understand the relevance and the importance of what it meant to go back home. I felt tremendous culture shock. I felt completely disconnected from my family there, couldn't speak the language. So in my head, it was a romanticized vision, but going there, I'm like, okay, there's so many differences.
I was born in the Philippines, Mandaluyong. At the time, my adopted parents were living here, but my biological parents, my mother is Filipina and my father is Chinese.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Kathara is using performance arts as a way of finding out who we are and sustaining that culture away from home, which is Philippines.
Back to the stage, please.
My first introduction was through my mentor, Lanita Boots Doom Lau, and she's a Kathara Philippines artistic director and founder. And so Kathara Philippines came here in 2002, really inspired me. I was just starting to do artistic direction and do storytelling and spoken word and pieces that kind of addressed colonial history of the Philippines. They really inspired me, and I said, I want to mentor under you. So we started Kathara Canada, and really invited other people to outside of the Filipino culture and also Filipinos here to learn from Kathara Philippines, and that began the journey of learning a deeper knowledge.
The culture that we have in the Philippines are slowly being taken away and eradicated by the government and by foreign mining companies and all that stuff, trying to kill off people, and I feel that culture will be lost. So I feel that as part of Kathara, this is our opportunity, our responsibility to keep that going.
In the Philippines, we have tribes, that have these practices, but they're nomads and they're connected to the land and they live life on the land. And so that's what we advocate, this idea of like reconnecting to our identity that's rooted to the land and our practices.
We may not be living in the Philippines, but I think we owe it to our ancestors to keep that culture and heritage going.
Tracing to Kathara was my way of, hey, this is where I'm from, this is what I know, what Philippine tribal is, not the sense of Philippine Catholic, Spanish colonized, American whitewashed, all this media talk. But being a known well of Kathara member, it made me aware a sense like, okay, this is what really the true of what Philippine culture is.
I joined after returning from a visit to the Philippines. I was on the island of Bohol and was just really drawn by an artist that had depicted indigenous life. And for some reason, those paintings just really called to me, and I'd never really felt that connection to the indigenous prior to that.
The first involvement I had with them was an event called Lapu-Lapu, which is the awakening of warriors, because Lapu-Lapu was the national hero in the Philippines, was the first indigenous person that fought against Magellan, who tried to conquer.
For me, we all journey in life trying to understand our sense of belonging. And I think, you know, through many, many layers of colonization, I think we have to kind of uncover these layers to really get at the root of who our people were. Because layers of colonization is really about the oppression of our true identity.
I got in touch with Kathara through my son. Babette was running a youth program, and so we slowly got to know each other, and she learned of my activism and my work, and shared with, that's where I learned more about the similarities, the struggle of the people and the loss of land and language and the barriers that are created by racism.
Come to the powwow, we recognize our elders, you feed them first, you let them speak. We hear, we listen. And in the Filipino culture, it's very much the same. That's rooted in our indigenous identity.
Just from the very nature of the Filipino, spirit is so similar to how ours used to be and what we're bringing back. It's just the joy of living without rigidity.
And from the First Nations, they start their traditions at a very young age, in language and dance and practices on the land. And recognizing that we all have a role and we have a duty to this land and to take care of Mother Earth.
I am a survivor of Cooper Island Residential School, and as well as my siblings and my parents, my mother. One of the things that happens is you become ashamed of your color, your culture, your family. They separate the brothers and the sisters. Before I went to the school, my siblings, we used to play like puppy dog, but because of the abuse that we suffered when we come out of the residential school, there's this unspoken boundary between family members, and we don't understand it's because of our issues.
When we come here to our First Nations and their suffering is our suffering, and when we can learn to kind of accept that same journey and show that we can support them in solidarity, that we've had the same history, I think that's where you come closer to knowing who you are, and it's an important piece.
Yeah, what I would like to say to our allies and to our visitors that have made what's now called Canada home is just to educate yourself. Understand that what you learn in this system, the school system, isn't history from our people. When they believe what is written in the history books, they don't understand our people and our history.
First steps of healing is first recognizing that we are wounded, accept that we are wounded. We have wounds, we have trauma. And when you learn that and accept that, then I think you're ready to say, I need to heal. And I've done that. And I think that, my traumas of sexual abuse and rape, what lifted me and kept my strength was being connected to my culture. And I see that too in the strength of First Nations here, the Coast Salish. It won't, nothing will harm you if you keep to your culture. The strength within you comes from your heritage.
I think in the event, of mining that's happening in the Philippines, but also here in Canada, there's even more of a push and a need and an urge for Indigenous communities to connect and to learn, because if that doesn't happen, there is a possibility of erasure, which is historical. We need to have conversations with the youth, with Filipino youth, so many Filipino immigrant youth that don't see the value of going back and looking back at the past and the history and seeing Canada and living here as like greener pastures. And that's a very common narrative that we need to reassess.
Because we are now in post-colonialism And I feel it's time for us to kind of heal from all the traumas that we've experienced. Not just Filipinos, but a lot of the indigenous people living in this time. And I think it's really essential to have that healing happen. And how does that look like? It's making connections with people, having a dialogue with people. And if it means holding space for people when that happens, it's very important. And I feel being part of Kathara, doing this work with the Babaylan, I feel that just initiates and affirms my desire to heal myself and help others as well.